what's up, everybody? Today on In Soccer We Trust, we're talking more World Cup draw, of course, the emergence of some players that are making moves to maybe get on this roster. I'm looking at you, Cameron Carter-Vickers and Georgi Mihailovic. And we, of course, have the Nations League coming up here in CONCACAF. There's a lot to talk about, so hit like and subscribe and hit us up in the comments because it's time to get after it. Yes, everybody, let's get after it. Another exciting installment of In Soccer We Trust is upon us with three of your favorite former U.S. men's national team players. Jimmy Conrad, that's me, Charlie Chuck Wagon Davies, and Hollywood Heath Pearce. Now, guys, before we go anywhere, we've had some time to sit with this World Cup draw. We probably had some friends that are like, oh, England's going to crush you, mate, and all that type of stuff. I got Julian Lescott in my DMs going, you guys have no chance. Come on, Julian Lescott. But, Charlie, I'm coming to you first. You've had some time to digest this World Cup draw. How are you feeling about it? You feeling worse? You feeling better? Where are you?
Charlie, call him out for that. He just name dropped to start the show. Call him out for that before you say anything.
Yeah, I didn't want to go there, but yeah, Lescott he popped up in my DMs as well.
He didn't pop into mine. Sorry.
I think they're trying to start something here.
They are.
But I will say I still like it. I still like this draw. It could always be worse. So from this standpoint,
that's true.
I like the challenge in front of this current U.S. men's national team.
Okay, before I go to Hollywood here, who's already trying to butt in and talk some trash because he doesn't know Julian Lescott like we do, Chuck. But who would you rather face? Wales, Scotland, Ukraine? Do you have a preference out of those three from a competitive standpoint that you think we have a better advantage on?
I'm gonna go Wales. Let's go Wales.
Okay.
I know they have some top players, and Gareth Bale is kind of leading the charge for Wales, but ultimately I like us against Wales. I mean, it's kind of they're all on level, I think a level playing field.
They have one guy though. Gareth Bale though that can change a game by himself.
Absolutely. But Ukraine is probably the team that you don't want to face if they are to kind of progress, just because of everything that they're playing for.
Right.
And how the world's going to kind of be around them and supporting them. That's probably the team that's going to be playing with a whole nother level of passion, right, and commitment. So ultimately, I think Wales would probably be a great matchup.
Okay, now, Heath, it's your turn. We did a poll question on In Soccer We Trust on Twitter. Hit us up at ISWT Pod. Let us know your thoughts. But Scotland was the favorite that everybody wanted to face in this. How are you feeling about the group overall? And then who would you prefer to play?
Wow. I mean, I still feel good about the group, and I still feel good. I know that the odds came out of like a 30+% chance for the U.S. to make it out of the group stages to the round of 16. None of that really means much to me because I when you're on the inside of what this group is capable of, I still feel really good about the ability to get out of this group. Now, with regard to who I like more in this matchup, it'd probably be Wales or Scotland. Again, I think Charlie had a good point around Ukraine. The rallying cry around that team, that national team. We saw that with Denmark at the Euros, obviously different circumstances, but with the Christian Eriksen thing, there was this momentum that they became the world's team for that tournament, right? Of just wanting to see, regardless, that team do well. I think the same stands for Ukraine if they were to get through, just in terms of the momentum that they'll have of sort of playing with house money. I think is something that you don't necessarily want to come up against. So I like the idea of Wales or Scotland. Now, if I had to pick one of the two, I would probably say Scotland. I like, again, it's going to be a scrap. It'll be a fight. And similarly to Wales, minus what I think would be, any sort of Gareth Bale-esque threats in the team. So I think I'd like to face Scotland if anything.
Okay. I like that shot. I think Scotland would be plucky. But I also feel like when I look at Scotland and Wales, they still look down upon us. Like they feel like they're better than we are. And I feel like we could use that to our advantage. Ukraine, assuming that game still goes on against Scotland to even get into that final against Wales in the Intercontinental Playoff or Euro Playoff, I do worry about that rallying cry. But I don't know if that game's going to even happen. So I don't know. Steve Clark's men are pretty good, Scotland. But Wales have that one X factor in Gareth Bale. If he shows up, Duke can win a game by himself, Chuck.
Absolutely. And the reason why I didn't even include Scotland is because I don't think they're gonna come out. So realistically, I think it's gonna be between Ukraine and Wales.
Interesting. Look at Chuck coming in with the analysis. Okay, now
Hey, by the way,
go.
Scotland are on a run right now too, though. Like they were sort of written off. I think they won 5 or 6 in a row to wrap up their games, and so they're certainly a team that has a belief that maybe they didn't, and has that momentum similar to what we talked about, Jimmy, when you talked about Mexico finishing off qualifying strong, where even though they were in a place from the media standpoint, the actual results were quite different, and that's a tough thing to bet against as well.
All right, now before we get into Cameron Carter-Vickers, who scored the winner in the Old Firm Derby for Celtic at Ibrox, which is no easy feat, and then Georgi Mihailovic, who was absolutely tearing it up for Montreal, even though they did play against a pretty bad FC Cincinnati, but he's getting a lot of chatter that maybe he should be included in this U.S. men's national team roster moving forward. And Chris Richards making his return, and Christian Pulisic about to play against Real Madrid in the Champions League once again. He scored against them in leg 1 of the semifinals last season. I have to say that we have 2 winners to announce for our $100 Paramount Plus gift card. And we're saying this because we want to obviously honor the winners and all of your support, but we're going to have more of these in the future. So those 2 winners from Wednesdays and Thursdays podcast from last week, we have Brock E and C Stone. Your names were picked at random from all of the entries, and our producer has DM'd you the details about how to redeem your prizes so that you have the opportunity to watch the Champions League, the Europa League, Serie A, NWSL, Scottish Premiership, countless soccer documentaries, NFL, the Halo series, Clifford, the big red dog, everybody. That's why you want this gift card. There isn't a better live and on-demand streaming service out there. So a shout out to Paramount Plus for allowing us to give these away, and for everybody for their support. We're going to continue to do this moving forward. So make sure when that happens, you're ready to go. Okay, let's start with Cameron Carter-Vickers, 24-year-old center back on loan from Tottenham to the one and only mighty Celtic in the Scottish Premiership, who are league champions. They're 6 points above Rangers, their biggest rivals, with 1 game left to go. Now, Cameron Carter-Vickers supposedly is going to sign a full-time deal at $6 million transfer fee, from what I understand, from Tottenham. Tottenham's happy with that. They respect him, but they think this is a good situation, kind of a win for everybody. Now, Jan Vertonghen, when he was playing for Spurs and Carter-Vickers got into the first team, called him an absolute beast. When I looked at it, I didn't realize how old he was. I thought he was like 27, 28 at this point. Dude's 24. Now, given his performance and his steady performances with Celtic, Heath, I'll come to you first. Do you feel like Cameron Carter-Vickers should be called in for these? Well, there's going to be 2 friendlies and then 2 Nations League games in June. What do you say?
Well, I think that we've decided to go with, and this is not a disrespect to the players that we have, the minimum viable product of what the capabilities of our center back pool is, right? Which is more of your hard-nosed center backs, win your duels, win your battles, defense first. We've kind of scrapped the idea of like, wouldn't it be nice if we had a John Anthony Brooks who maybe he gets turned in the wrong positions or gets pulled out of positions, but really good on the ball. Tim Ream, same thing, gets pulled out of positions, but is very good on the ball in terms of distribution, keeping the ball and things like that. I think we've dialed it back to something a little more simple, just athletic, good, foundationally strong center backs. Cameron Carter-Vickers fits into that conversation. And I've actually been kind of not screaming, but yelling for his name to be included in these camps, considering that he's playing for a team that's competing for trophies. Now, to go back to, oddly, what Matt Turner had said in terms of the level and the quality that Greg Berhalter was talking to him about, which was like being on the bench at Arsenal is better than I'm paraphrasing what he said into my own words, but being on the bench at Arsenal or competing for a spot at Arsenal, but probably not winning that spot is more important to be at a higher level on a daily basis than the matches that you're playing in maybe Major League Soccer. I think about the same for Cameron Carter-Vickers. However, he's in a title race at a club that has to play under immense pressure where second place is failure always there, right? And yes, they're one of the 2 big clubs, but coming out where he's getting results against Rangers, I think is certainly a shout. It's just one of those things where you start to look at it and it starts to get really crowded in terms of where does he fit in. Now, if we're going to go 27 to a World Cup, maybe that's a little bit different, but to bring him in this late in the cycle just feels like, what is it from getting a goal against Rangers that changes his performance where he's one of the best, considered statistically one of the best defenders in the Scottish Premier League? What's the difference now, right? Other than the fact that he's getting more attention because he's scoring a big goal in a big game. I think he's been at a high level.
If you're Cameron Carter-Vickers, what else are you supposed to do? I mean,
that's my point. It's like nothing's changed other than the fact that it's a headline moment, but he's been good. And statistically, again, I think one of the best 2 or 3 dual winning center backs and actually set piece.
He averages 4.4 clearances a game, which is for Celtic in the Scottish Premiership. So take that, as you say, with a little bit of a grain of salt. But that is almost twice as many as any other defender for Celtic, and I think it leads all the Scottish Premiership in terms of his influence, his mere presence, Charlie. So Carter Vickers, where do you see him? Do you feel like he deserves a chance? I mean, if you're going to look at anybody, we only have 6 games, everybody. We only have 6 games before we can pick a team. Now, we can bring people into camp and all that stuff, but it's easier to judge, obviously, if you have games to hold them accountable for. Do you think he should be brought in for these June games?
I absolutely do think he deserves a chance. When you're playing consistently for a top club in a league like Celtic, who will be the eventual champions, I believe. The problem with the Scottish Premiership is ever since Rangers went into administration, everyone kind of booked it because that league was basically you either played for Rangers or Celtic, and whoever the winner was typically playing in Champions League. Since Rangers administration, we haven't seen a Scottish team really in the qualifying group stages of Champions League. And we sure as hell haven't seen them compete in Champions League. So I think now you're starting to see a lot of players go and play in different leagues and different clubs. And so therefore the Scottish League, I think, dropped considerably. I feel like it's now starting to pick back up. And with Cameron Carter-Vickers now being a starting center back on a championship team, you got to give him a chance. He's playing consistently. He's doing well. He's getting all the plaudits. I mean, he's earned a call-up, especially at the center back position. Now, when you flip it to Georgi Mihailovic, I would say he's a creative player. And I think he's grown considerably since the first time that Greg kind of included him with this U.S. men's national team. But it's much, much harder to break into this midfield with the U.S. men's national team than it is at center back. And so the only way I see a path for Mihailovic to join this midfield is if he makes a move to Europe in the summer.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we could argue that Jesus Ferreira is playing with FC Dallas, and he might be playing 4-dimensional chess by staying in MLS as opposed to going to an Augsburg in the Bundesliga. Though, shout out to Ricardo Pepi, played 89 minutes out on the wing on the right side. And Augsburg beat Wolfsburg and John Brooks 3-0. Must-win game for Augsburg. Hey. So nice to see that he was involved. And I actually thought, did you watch any of that game, you two? His movement off the ball, his little layoffs, and like when he looks to get it back, and his change of speed when he makes his decision. Excellent stuff from Ricardo Pepi. Right now, though, and I was kind of yelling at the screen, like, play him back into space. Ricardo Pepi created a passing lane. Play him, and they're just not playing him. And it makes me wonder, you know how sometimes there are players, Karim Benzema, I think, used to do this a little bit to Vinicius Jr., like, nah, I'm going to play the ball back to you yet.
Yeah, but Karim Benzema, by the way.
I don't trust you. I don't trust you yet.
Jimmy, Karim Benzema, that's the name I was literally just about to bring up, but I get in trouble anytime I bring up any other names in comparison to American players. But Karim Benzema does a great job of knowing when to flick, lay off, and then all of a sudden sprint into the box and get into good spots, right? And I think there's certain parts of Benzema's game that Ricardo Pepi should be looking at constantly, which is there are long periods when Benzema doesn't get the ball at times, but he's efficient with the ball. He knows exactly. Same with Lewandowski. When he checks off, he knows exactly, like, this is not the moment for me to try something. Just get it back and then get into good spots. And then the part 2 to that is if you saw Chicharito's run this weekend where he goes to check to that near post and goes back to the back post, those types of little things in terms of being dynamic in the box that allows him to be in good spots to finish are going to continue to make him a better player, whether he's a winger or not. I mean, the modern game, the wingers are sort of forwards anyway and have a little bit different of movement. But there's a number of players, by the way, not just Mihailovic, that could be considered for this national team over the next 7-8 months. You know, you've got Brian Gutierrez with the Fire, another teenager, Obed Vargas, the Alaskan, Alaskan hotbed of football development with the Sounders. And these guys are teenagers too, coming through and showing that they can play at a very high level and very, very young. Mihailovic is another one that, if you go back to when they gave Ricardo Pepi, I think it was like the Young Player of the Year award for MLS. There was other players statistically that were playing in that same arena in terms of statistics. And that was Mihailovic, and it was who was Tejan Buchanan. And both of them kind of commented on social media being like, hey, I got screwed out of this because of the hype of a young American player that's kind of got this story that Ricardo Pepi has. And so there's a lot of guys knocking on that door. Nobody of which that I think has really stood up to really demand outside of Cameron Carter-Vickers, who, Jimmy, you and I talked about before Charlie started joining us on this new show, we talked about it a lot of like, what more can somebody do, right? What more can somebody actually do than what he's doing now? Has the team at the top of the table, statistically one of the best defenders in the league, not like over the hill in terms of past the age of fitting in with this group moving forward. And I just don't know, where Greg starts to find this flexibility to bring players in, for meaning that some of these players are going to miss out on potentially crucial moments in this cycle.
What I think is interesting is that with Ricardo Pepi being pretty strong as a winger, well, we don't need any more wingers, man. We need a goddamn number 9 on this team. We need a number 9. We need to put a stamp on the number 9 position, even though I was pleasantly surprised at how well he played in that spot. And I think he's going to get another look. Played 89 minutes. Speaking of defenders, Chris Richards came back in for Hoffenheim. He missed 7 straight league games, got 45 minutes, and their 2-1 loss to Bochum this past weekend. He didn't really have any influence on the negative side of things in terms of why the goals were scored. There's some suspect defending, though, with some of his teammates. Looking at you, Hoffenheim defenders, not named Chris Richards. And then with Georgi Mihailovic, he's only 23. And to your point, Chuck, I think what's interesting about him is that Luca De La Torre, who played 90 minutes for Heracles this weekend in their 2-0 win, not that they're the same, but they're kind of the same. And it feels like De La Torre might just have a little bit of an advantage, even though Mihailovic has been around Berhalter. He was part of the 2019 Gold Cup team. So
do you feel like, I feel like Mihailovic is a little bit sharper of a threat
in terms of like getting in the box? There's something to be said there. I would love to see Mihailovic and Carter-Vickers come in and have a chance in this, because you already know what the other guys are about, and you've seen them in high pressure situations. Most of them you've tested now in World Cup qualifying. Now let's see what it looks like in a couple friendlies, potentially in the Nations League, and take it from there. Do you call him Mihailovic as well, Chuck?
Yeah, I would like to see him in the camp. I think he's grown in a lot of ways. I think most importantly, his strength on the ball. I think it was whenever things got a little heated or physical, he tended to shy away. I'm not seeing that from him now. He looks like he put on some weight. He's been in the gym. He looks confident in every step that he makes. He looks like he's playing ahead of the game. He looks really impressive. He's in tune with the attack. I think he finds the gaps perfectly, the weight of his passes. He gives you something different when you're looking at this current group of midfielders in the U.S. men's national team. They all cover ground, most of them. I mean, you're talking about Kellen Acosta, Yunus Musa, Tyler Adams, Weston McKennie. They can cover ground like no other. But when you talk about having the ball at your feet, certain specific movements, attacking movements, and playing between the lines and being a little bit more of a creative playmaker, not so much. And I think that's where Mihailovic fits in. Luca De La Torre is one of those players as well who can get on the ball and relieve pressure. But I think as far as breaking teams down, you get a little something like that from Mihailovic.
Now, Heath, do you feel like it might be a little bit unfair to these players that they're maybe, if they do get called in, won't be playing with the 8? Maybe the 8 team will be called in, but if, let's say they're not, that we can't see a Carter-Vickers next to Zimmerman or Miles Robinson, or we can't see Mihailovic with Tyler Adams and a Yunus Musa, because I feel like that's how we're really going to know, because you don't know. I mean, even when I came into the national team, when I got to go around Eddie Pope and Pablo Mastroianni, and all of a sudden you just kind of, you level up your game to everybody else, and then you fit in pretty seamlessly. And then all of a sudden the coaching staff is looking at you like, hey, all right, he can hold his own with these guys, and he can organize and put them in good spots. And we do seem really fluid with him in the team where there is no drop off. And so that makes me a little bit concerned if these guys are really going to get a chance. That said, most of the European guys will be available because the window's in June and all the leagues will be done. What are your thoughts on if bringing these guys are in, if it will even make a difference, even if they play well, just because they're kind of friendlies and let's say the Nations League are more glorified friendlies?
Yeah, I think we're talking about marginal gains here, right? Like you're not. There's clearly something that Greg Berhalter sees missing in Cameron Carter-Vickers' game, considering he's been playing since the summer. That he might be getting more attention, but there might be small things that Greg goes. This is, again, we talked about the John Anthony Brooks of like, is he a good enough teammate and locker room guy to come in as a non-starter in this team as a role, or is he a guy that I need to put in? Does it make it more complicated than it does easy? That I wonder about a lot of these players coming in later into the cycle. Now, again, you talk about strikers. If somebody's got the hot hand, then yes, of course you bring them in and you give them a run, because we're still searching for answers on the attacking side of things. At least we've constantly had this rotation of players that again, you get down to 23 players after 17. You want to bring those hot hands that may have not been in the cycle just for the last 5 minutes of a big game. You know, you're 1-1 with Iran, you need a goal, something like that. You're going to bring those players in. But at the same time, you've still got Aaron Long, who's not quite there yet. You go back to the 2010 cycle with all of us. I mean, Bob Bradley rolled the dice on Gooch, who wasn't fit yet, and I don't even think was fully fit at the World Cup, saying, I would rather have Gooch at 80, hoping he gets to 100 because of what he can give me, than bring in yourself, Jimmy, or who else
Clarence
was there? Danny Caleb, Clarence Goodson made the squad, but like ended up passing on a couple of these guys, Chad Marshall, a number of these guys who were sort of the bubble players, knowing that it's like, I'm going to roll. It's a trust thing. It's if I can get this guy back to the level, otherwise I might not need him. You start to go through all that when you're building a roster for things, because you don't want 2 in every position, because it just feels, you know, you want maybe 2 and 3 of your back 4, and your fourth, you have a hybrid player. You know, now you don't need necessarily an extra winger if you have Ricardo Pepi that can go there. And it starts to become this shuffling effect where Greg can focus his attentions on specialty types of moments against specialty types of opponents, where it's a little bit more of a tactical play. So it's just hard for me to see Cameron Carter-Vickers rounding that corner in terms of getting the trust from Greg in the amount of time needed to cement himself in the squad with enough minutes to say, I'm better by a margin than Aaron Long, who you trust and really, really like.
Well, I think you got to bring him in, because if somebody does get hurt, at least you kind of know what you're getting with Carter-Vickers and how he fits in with the group. And maybe the same for Mihailovic. I just want to see them get a look with the team and see how it goes. Now, Charlie, let's look forward to the Champions League coming up. Christian Pulisic didn't play this past weekend against Brentford. Thomas Tuchel ends up saying that Thiago Silva, we brought him back and started him against Brentford, is a bit different than Christian, because Thiago didn't play the third match for Brazil. He came back one day earlier, didn't have the same jet lag. Now for Christian, we have to decide, didn't train today. We gave him a recovery session, but he was very tired with jet lag and time difference.
Ooh, shots fired at Greg for playing him all 3, huh?
Maybe. So I feel like they rested him and he'll be ready. He was very good against Real Madrid, especially in leg 1 in Madrid last season. This first leg is at Stamford Bridge. Do you think Christian Pulisic will start this one? I guess that's my thoughts. And how are you feeling about where he is just emotionally? Because it seemed like he was pretty pissed after we lost to Costa Rica. Obviously going to go and celebrate once you kind of get over that. But he just feels like he's got unfinished business. He's got a little hunger to him right now that I really appreciate.
But real quick, Charlie, before you say that, just so you know, he must have been pissed off too that Brentford put a beating on Chelsea while he wasn't playing too.
Exactly.
Like, 4-1 for anybody that didn't watch that. It was pretty bad. Basically securing safety for Brentford, but yeah.
Yeah, I would say he's hungry. I mean, he's determined. I think for every player, it's now a build up to the World Cup, and you're trying to get in the most form. You're trying to stay healthy, and you're trying to stay, I think, motivated and ambitious to continue to play at the highest level and push yourself to want more, so that come the World Cup, you stand a chance to like make a real impact. And I think for Christian Pulisic, he knows, man, I have to still fight for my place every week at Chelsea. It's never a guarantee. He could score a brace and still the next week he's still looking over his shoulder. Am I going to play or not? And I think Thomas Tuchel, you can either give him credit or you can be like, man, he's done enough. He can be your player, to just continue to keep him, motivated, right? To not let him settle. And most players, I mean, when you play at those clubs, you're never going to be comfortable. And I think that's what all national team coaches hope for, is all these players feel that way, that they always have to be on their toes and they never get comfortable and they're pushing themselves. I think for Christian, no matter where he is, he's gonna have that feeling, because it's either it's with the club or it's with the national team. Everyone's expecting him to kind of be the player who can change a game. And so for him, I don't think he's going to go from not playing in Brentford to starting in the Champions League. I still think he'll come off the bench, but that's not to say the second leg he's not a starter.
I think really,
Jimmy, is it a move for you, by the way?
What's
that? A move? Does Pulisic need to make a move in the summer?
I need to see what happens. These are the games. This is part of the reason why I asked Charlie and ultimately, well, all of us to have.
But it sort of feels like the writing's on the wall for him, right? In terms of like, you're going to be a rotational player that's maybe 12th or 13th in my lineup. At least over the last couple of months, he's been fit and healthy, and he's still not getting the minutes.
But I feel like when he's been getting the minutes, he's been making more of those minutes in the recent month or two than he has prior to that, when he was coming off the significant injury, when he was having interviews where he was just talking about kind of how lost he was mentally.
Yeah, but that's great for Thomas Tuchel, Jimmy, to have a guy who's doing better with the minutes that he gives him. But if you're
I know
on the
that
Pulisic side, you're kind of like, but I'm doing better with the minutes you're giving me.
Is it worth the
I'm
risk?
not getting more.
I don't know. I mean, this is why I asked: will Tuchel trust him in these big games? He trusted him last year, and it paid off when he started. Now, obviously, to Chuck's point, he can come on and be a super sub and probably be a nice spark off the bench. But I don't know. My concern with Chelsea is they're playing with a back four. They did against Brentford, and they just don't look as good or as fluid. No Jorginho, so they didn't really have that normal kind of pivot to transition them from side to side or in transition. And I don't want to see them in a 4 against Real Madrid, because I just feel like Pulisic won't be able to have as much influence. When he crushed them last year because they had a couple slow center backs and he got in behind. Ultimately, that's led to the goal that he scored. I don't know if he'll play that high up the field. We'll see if he's playing off the shoulder of Kai Havertz. I'd love for him to start, but we'll see. I guess that's ultimately my question. I don't know whether he should go or not, man. This last part of the season is going to be really interesting, not only for him, but I just want to segue very quickly to Tyler Adams, because I'm concerned. He didn't play this weekend. A lot of Americans didn't, right? A lot of them logged a lot of minutes and are traveling really far to get back to their clubs and need some rest. I totally get that. But the guy that played in front of him scored 2 goals, and he'd only scored Conrad Leimer, and he only scored 2 goals all season, and now he scored 2 in one game against Borussia Dortmund in Dortmund, which was a big win for RB Leipzig. They're taking on Atalanta this week in the Europa League quarterfinals. Given how well they played against Dortmund, I don't see Domenico Tedesco, the manager of Leipzig, changing that. I worry a little bit for Tyler Adams. I think maybe even more so than Pulisic, he should make a move. What do you say to that, Heath?
I mean, his last 90 minutes for RB Leipzig was mid-January.
That makes me nervous, man. Because
it makes me nervous. Now I'm less so worried about a
pro.
guy scoring goals around him and things like that. But you don't change a winning team. He is a role player where, again, another one that borders on a flex player for a team, because of the fact that he could play your right wing back, he can play right back, he can play the 6, he could probably do the 8, he can be in a number of spots and come in with the energy that you need. Now, that's very similar to what you need as the midfielder, as the starter, but I just worry about his timing, because you go back to, again, end of last year, the talk was about, like, what's the next club? What's the next club? This guy's got to graduate from this, right? And he said there's very few clubs in the world that you graduate from Leipzig to go to, and not graduate, but that you leave Leipzig to go to. Sure. It's got to be the right club. And now he's not playing, and you start to go, well, now there's a lot more clubs that you potentially have to go to be in a better situation than playing spot minutes at RB Leipzig. Granted, he's always going to be, again, he's going to probably play every game there, but they've gone through the rotation of managers, and he's out of favor in terms of being that guy that's going to get them the results as a 90-minute starter. So he's another one that I think. Serginho Dest is another one on sort of the trading block from what I read today with Bayern Munich trying to pull Lewandowski and some of these things. Some of it obviously clearly rumors, but a number of guys that Summer's going to play a big role in, not necessarily whether they make the World Cup squad, because like Charlie mentioned in our last show, these guys play at these clubs. They're going to be in no matter what. It's a matter of the form that they're in, that we need them to be in to actually navigate the group stage.
My question to you, Jimmy, is if Chelsea's not the club for Christian Pulisic, or if Tyler Adams has got to move from RB Leipzig, where do they go? God, what's the best case scenario?
I'm glad you asked Jimmy. Ask Jimmy. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. I mean, to Julius's point, Adams should go to Dortmund. Like, that's an interesting one. I hadn't really thought about a lateral move in the same league, and I would love to see Adams and Jude Bellingham in the same midfield. That would be, I mean, talk about ball hawks. Those guys would be all over the place. With regard to Pulisic, that's more difficult. You're wearing the number 10 shirt for Chelsea, the reigning Champions League winners. Anything that you do is probably, 99% of your moves are going to be a step down, I think.
How about Atletico Madrid or something like that? Like somewhere that's like a big Champions League club.
But it's a different league.
Yeah, but you see, I think La Liga would be a great league for Christian, but Atletico Madrid, they defend, right? Yeah. So I think tactically it's probably not the best team for him.
Yeah, look at Joao Felix. He doesn't really fit, even though he's got special gifts going forward.
So maybe
Pulisic and Inter Milan
I guess what I'm saying,
Inter Milan's not bad. That would be a bad shout.
Something like that, where it's like big club, Champions League, an ebb and flow of a type of team that's not going to, like, Chelsea's expected to go perfect every year. These types of things where, if you're not contributing, look at Lukaku, huge signing, can't get a start. no one's above the law at a club like Chelsea, who's got 35 players that could play at a very high level. Whereas, you know, it's got to be at a club where there is somewhat depth issues, where we know Christian Pulisic at least has a chance to a spot to lose versus, you know, having to fight week in, week out, where it's sort of the interchanging world-class player or world-class adjacent player between Havertz, Werner, Mason Mount, Christian Pulisic, you know, and then the list goes on and on and on from there at Chelsea.
Yeah, it's tough. When I think about Tyler Adams, maybe like a mid-table Premier League club, the one that has some room for growth, Villa, Wolves, Leicester, Southampton, something like that, where he could get in. You know, he's going to probably get 90 minutes on the regular, and if the team does well, then everybody benefits, right? All the boats will rise, all the water will rise, and all the boats, whatever.
Charlie, do you think Adams in the Premier League is a good shout? Do you think he has that sort of strength and whatever? Like when I see him dialed in, he can play anywhere. Yeah. But just on that's different than a week to week, like your consistent sort of form.
Yeah, I mean the intensity matches exactly how he plays, and I think he would rise to the occasion. Then it comes into, will he stay healthy? Because the amount of matches you play in England, and with that type of intensity every single match, the amount of miles you're putting on those legs, that's a lot. So I think it'd be interesting to see if Tyler can get his move. I know Arsenal had been floating around for a while now, but Arsenal have gone in a kind of a crazy new direction, and he has kind of stopped playing at Leipzig. So will Arsenal still be interested in paying a considerable fee for Tyler Adams?
Newcastle.
Or Leeds, right? He could go with Jesse Marsh and play.
Well, we're sending everybody to Leeds. I'm all about American nepotism. If there's an American manager, then bring them all in.
The Pulisic one is so tricky, though. It's so tricky. I don't know if there's an out-and-out team that really sticks out for me. And I know that he got linked to Barcelona for a while, but then they went and made some signings that don't make sense for them to sign him anymore. But yeah, that's a good one. I think we'll obviously have plenty of fodder to talk about that moving forward. All right, everybody. We are going to take our very first and only break of the show. But when we return, we're going to be talking about the Nations League Draw, which is happening tonight on Paramount Plus. It's Monday night. If you're listening to this on podcast, we appreciate you if you are. And we're going to break down the two friendlies that we have leading up to those two Nations League games and who we think we should play. So don't go anywhere.
The Covenant will not stop.
There is something within us. Something sacred. Something worth protecting. Silver team, on me.
Welcome back to In Soccer We Trust. I'm Jimmy Conrad alongside Charlie Davies and Heath Pearce. We appreciate you guys hanging out with us on the YouTubes. Make sure you hit like and subscribe and turn on those notifications. And if you're listening to us in a podcast form, make sure you go to whatever audio platform you use. Give us a 5-star review. That's us doing some peer pressure, and leave us a review if you've got some time to make that happen. That way we can keep giving you the good stuff, the free content week after week after week. Also, I should let everybody know that a week unlike any other is finally here. The Masters returns to Augusta National, where Hideki Matsuyama will defend his green jacket. So go join the First Cut Golf Podcast, where the entire crew is previewing this year's tournament, from storylines to picks and even daily fantasy advice. The First Cut has you covered. The First Cut Golf Podcast is available wherever you're listening to this podcast. All right, boys, let's talk about the Nations League Draw happening tonight, Monday, April 4th, 7 p.m. Eastern on Paramount Plus. We're going to have hopefully, I'm actually looking forward to the draw having its own pageantry, like we saw with the World Cup draw. I want to see some cartoons. I want to see all this type of stuff. We probably won't get it, but I'm hoping. Now, the U.S. men's national team will play two home friendlies between June 1st and June 8th. And then the Nations League matches will happen on June 11th and June 14th. The opponents and the home and away designations will be determined in that draw tonight. A full squad, though, is expected to play in all of these games, which is good news. So, Charlie, I'll come to you here first. Let's talk about the friendlies. Who would you like to play in these games, given what we've seen from the World Cup draw, and maybe how we have to start to prepare for the Englands, the Irans, and the Wales, Scotland, Ukraine type teams?
Well, certainly a European team, in one that's a high caliber team, similar to a pot one team. So you're looking at the Netherlands. I'd like to see the US play the Netherlands, Germany, France,
Spain?
Belgium, Spain, Portugal. Literally any of those
Any pot one teams.
any pot one team.
Okay.
Because that kind of gives you a good sense of where the team is, where they need to improve, and you're playing against a top-notch international club country that has all their players. So you don't have to worry about, oh, are we playing, the best of what they have to offer. So I think for certain there, and I wouldn't mind, I know Mexico is playing Argentina. If we also played Argentina in that window.
Okay. Swinging for the fences, Chuck. I like that. We'll just go get France and Argentina as our friendlies. I love that.
If you're really trying to compete for a World Cup, and this is the US, you play the two best teams that you can possibly play.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm. No, that's fair. You know what I do want to take into consideration, Heath, is that Harry Kane this particular weekend, excellent against Newcastle, but obviously it was Newcastle, so take that into consideration. But he's so good at dropping into midfield and spraying those balls to runners in advance. Heung-min Son, Kulusevski with Spurs, but he also can do the same thing for England. And when they do, it's tough as a center back to know whether to step with him or follow him into midfield and leave open that passing lane, or to just hold your position and let your holding midfielder maybe try to track him, even though they're probably not going to be as close. And that will still open up a different type of space that they can exploit. I'm trying to think of which national team might have that as an option. I guess I'm looking more at Germany because they don't have a number 9. But that's not the same as having a number 9 who pulls you out of position. What do you say about the friendlies?
Oh man, yeah, I agree. I think about it like I definitely want to tier one, like your top somebody, just because of the fact that it might not mirror the style of play. If you can't get England, it might not mirror the style of play. Oh shoot, make it England. But like it might not mirror the style of play of the teams you're going to play against in your group. But it makes us have to adjust to another team that's probably going to, outside of the way in which Mexico tries to control the flow of the play, be a little bit quicker, be a little more experienced, and all those things that we saw lacking at times when we went through that period of like Greg Berhalter as the manager, and then a couple of years where it's just friendlies, mostly sort of regional friendlies, things like that. We haven't really had, outside of Switzerland, we played Wales, we played, I'm trying to think of what other opponents we've really had to challenge with this team that now has substantially more experience than they did before. We need to play against teams
Italy could be a bit.
Yeah. I mean, why not? I mean, just you need to play against teams that can humble you in different ways and force you to have to, again, get into plan B and plan C and plan D throughout a game, where the fluidity is where you're really going to have your IQ as a team collectively and individually tested in a way that we haven't, right? We've been so I guess relatively successful at this point, finishing third in CONCACAF, but so successful in our region that we've forgotten that there's a world of football nations that play completely different and will approach the game completely different and make and present challenges that we can't present. So playing against the best teams, I think, is really, really important, more so than finding like what's the mimic to Iran or the mimic to another team.
Well, when I think about Iran and Wales, Scotland, Ukraine, they've kind of fallen to they're good teams. So I'm not trying to quote unquote take the piss, but they're good, hardworking teams that have some special players. They're going to be well organized, tactically and technically astute, all that type of stuff. I feel like we've seen those games. We have our own opponents in CONCACAF that not necessarily mirror it like for like, but have some similarities. When you look at England, though, I think it is important, to your point, Heath, to be exposed to other teams that will provide something. For instance, but I want it to actually somewhat look like England. England do like to at times get going with their outside backs, especially if Trent Alexander-Arnold gets going, if he starts. Now, Kyle Walker was excellent in the Euros for them, so I don't know what Gareth Southgate's going to do, but if you have these outside backs that can get forward, it makes such a big difference in terms of how you defend and who goes out to step first and where are you shaping the play defensively. And then when you win the ball, how do you transition? I would actually love to see Brazil, because I feel like Brazil, even though their outside backs might be their weakest spot on their team, they still probably lend themselves to making that numerical advantage happen in those areas of the field.
Would you play that for a win, though, Jimmy? Like, say
I don't know.
Brazil, I mean, of course, you always play for the win.
No, I get it.
There's also like sub exercises within a game against Brazil, similar to when I remember playing against Spain, humble brag, that
here we go.
There was long periods where you didn't have the ball and you had to stay disciplined and you had to wait for your moments, and you knew your chances for a goal were going to come off of a counterattack where they're a little overexposed and things like that, where you're almost baiting them in. But more than anything, it was an exercise of like discipline, of being on the same page, communication, all these things that, you know, you can really learn a lot from your group and the unity of that group in these things versus, because it's not going to be fun for those players. They're not going to enjoy playing against Brazil, other than the fact they're playing against Brazil, because you are not going to have the ball much. They're going to make you chase it. They're going to make you really have to figure out ways to beat them, which I think is great for the team, but not necessarily for the way in which we want to play as a country.
No, that's fair.
I would
go ahead.
I would throw out Denmark would be another one that
good one.
maybe mimics a Wales, Ukraine,
Yeah,
Scotland in that kind of, because you also want to play teams that are playing in a World Cup, because they're also kind of in the same process where they're putting their best players forward because they're trying to figure out, you know, in some cases there's one or two spots that they're trying to figure out who the best player is moving forward. So they have a lot on the line as well. Even though it's a friendly, these are both like, you know, with the intention of trying to put your best 11 forward for the World Cup. So I think it's important that whoever the friendly is against, that they're both World Cup opponents.
Yeah, this is going to be tough. I mean, I did see a shout there from Julius in the comments who said Italy and Colombia might not be a bad shout to cut your teeth against those guys as well. I don't know. It's going to be interesting. And I do want our guys to suffer a little bit, Heath. I know we suffered in different ways in World Cup qualifying and CONCACAF, but because of what these other types of opponents, these tier 1 opponents, as you call them, what they demonstrate, what they show you, how they, and I would just want to see us. And I think it'd be good for us, as I know the players will suffer, but to have that video to be able to reflect on, hey, remember when they did this? This looks very similar to, you know, this team we're going to be playing in the World Cup or whatever. I think would be a really important exercise. So I don't know, interesting times, and I'm excited. I don't know when that's getting announced. Do we have any insight on that?
No, Charlie knows everything about everybody, so we'll just wait for him to announce it to us. But like, this is my biggest downside of Nations League, who we're going to go up against at this point. I think Nations League is hugely important because it's better. It's weird because normally this would be better than friendlies because there's consequence involved. But because it's a World Cup year, you're like, I'll take the friendlies. Give me the friendlies. Just play all friendlies against good teams if there's not any matches of consequence against teams at a high level. So to me, this is the problem, that we've been really stuck in our region for a couple of years now, for the most part, right? At least 12 months. And we're going to probably, you know, with Nations League, continue that we got to be able to snap out of that because because the game is different everywhere. And I think we have the ability to drink our own Kool-Aid on CONCACAF right now, even though we did finish third. I get all that. There's no reason to do that, but it's really easy to think that we are better because we haven't seen the diversity of opponents. Because CONCACAF is relatively similar as soon as you get to Mexico and Central America in terms of style of play, the way the game is played, obviously different tactics and things like that. But so I don't want to generalize all of that, but it is very different than what you're going to get from a Wales or a Scotland, who are different than you're going to get from a Ukraine, who are very different. Yeah,
Oof.
Senegal, or who you're going to get against a Iran, who's going to be technical, quick, and play the game differently. And so that diversity of opponent is, while we've got a lot of experience, we're still missing some of that of like big international games. Because I know both of you guys have played in big international games that were not within the confines of qualifying and COVID. So you had the ability to have a window where it's 2 games in Europe, and it's those types of things. We haven't really had that with this group yet. I mean, we did early on, but very different group.
Well, I'm curious not only with who we're going to pick in the friendlies, but where we're going to play these games. You know, I do think there's something to be said for potentially playing them elsewhere, and maybe in an environment where it's going to be tough and hard, and maybe can replicate some of the surroundings we'll be facing at the end of the year. I don't know if we're going to find that type of heat this in June, but maybe we will. Now let's move on to the CONCACAF Nations League. I'm going to do my very best to break down how this all works, because it doesn't feel very straightforward, but there are 41 participating CONCACAF member associations that will be allocated in their respective league pots according to their CONCACAF ranking following the FIFA International Match Window of March 2022, which just happened. Now, the draw is happening tonight on Paramount Plus in Miami, Florida, and there'll be 3 draws, one for each league. There's League A. Okay, League A has the 3 highest ranked teams and CONCACAF's representative in the FIFA World Cup Intercontinental Playoffs. So that'll be Costa Rica. Pot 2 will be the next 4 ranked teams. Pot 3 will be the lowest 4 ranked teams. You can see it here on the screen. So we'll just focus on that. But there are going to be 3 leagues. There's 3 pots for League A, 4 pots for League B, and 3 pots for League C. Now, each of the leagues, respective leagues, A, B, and C's draws will begin by randomly selecting a team from pot 1 and placing them in Group A of the respective league. So what this is basically saying is we won't get probably Mexico or Canada in our group.
Or Costa Rica.
Or Costa Rica. So, which is a bit of a disappointment because I know we're trying to cut our teeth against good teams, especially meaningful competitions. And we might end up with, and not to say that Honduras would be.
I'd like Panama and Curacao.
Yeah. Okay. So Panama and Curacao. Okay. That's not a bad shot. I mean, who else? I wouldn't mind.
Curacao brings their players. I want Curacao.
That's true. That's true. Panama would be a good one. El Salvador wouldn't be too bad. They just got promoted. Jamaica, I guess there's some teams there that will make it difficult for us. But I think we're only going to get one of those mid-tier teams, and then probably like a Martinique or a Curacao or Suriname. Charlie, I'll go to you. Which you said you want a little Panama and Curacao.
Panama and Curacao, because Panama, we saw how much they improved this World Cup qualifying cycle, and I just think it would be a good opponent to have. And the Curacao, I think, is probably, they have the most dynamic players out of that pot 3 group if they bring all of their players.
Okay, Heath, where are you? Who would you like to face, especially given that we're going to probably face one of the teams we just faced in the Ocho in World Cup qualifying?
Man, honestly, it's weird because I remember playing against Barbados in World Cup qualifying, and while we beat them 8-0, which is still a record that stands at home. When we played them away, it was a very different game.
How many flexes for Heath today? Okay, keep going.
I just want people to know, if you know, you know, or if I tell you, then you'll know.
Hey, did you assist to me against Grenada, by the way?
Yeah, of course I did. Yeah,
everybody was. It's a party.
Yeah. I remember, Charlie, that was a long ball, I think Parkhurst hit it over the top to me, and I think I fed it in to you. You scored. That was right before your move, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember was that the only game you played in that?
Charlie didn't have time for any of those other games, Heath.
But
no, I played the next one. I came off the bench against Honduras.
Yeah. I guess for me, the point I was trying to get at while I got on a tangent talking about myself was Barbados. Barbados away was an interesting one because you had a lot of these sort of championship League One players playing in a game where condensed field, very difficult, where we were challenged in a different way. And granted, it was different because it was a 2-legged affair and whatever, but the challenges were still there. And if we can find an opponent that's going to challenge us in a way that we've continued to struggle with, which is bunkered in, organized, where we've got to outsmart them, I think that's a really good play. So there's a few of these Caribbean nations, depending on who they roll out or bring in for those games, that I think could be a big challenge for us to try to solve problems and use it as a learning match. That I don't know, Panama would be great, but I know we're not going to get them. Costa Rica, but I almost don't want to play them anyway. I want us to start to evolve in terms of, I'd rather almost have who was somebody that played us really, El Salvador when they
I was about to say El Salvador because
made it hard for us, and we had to find solutions that's ultimately made this team better now, 14 games later, but it's still going to continue to be a problem because any other team watching us on tape just goes, just force them wide and sit back and play discipline, and this team's going to struggle a little bit because we haven't figured out how to connect the dots.
I want El Salvador. I really do. I think Hugo Perez has done a great job of getting them organized and stacked up. 0-0 in the first game of qualifying there. I know we had a bit of a mixed lineup, but we couldn't really break them down. I thought, even though we created some opportunities, Jesus Ferreira had a couple good chances in that first half, and we played them at home, and we won 1-0. Anthony Robinson scored in that one to give everybody a fresh reminder. They still were difficult to break down. I think they would challenge us in a way, to your point, Heath, and you as well, Charlie, where we have to figure out, we have to solve problems. And I think they feel pretty good about organizing against us. So I hope we get El Salvador.
Honduras was hard for us in the Nations League semi. We could have lost that one.
That's true. We could have lost that one. I remember Zach Steffen made a save on who was it up top?
Lozano.
Albert Elise?
Yeah. It was Lozano.
Yeah. It was unreal. Like, he was in, and Zach Steffen made a great save. And obviously we lose that. Who knows what kind of conversation we're having? But I wouldn't mind an El Salvador or a Honduras. I think because they started to go and play a little bit younger, them getting that result. Geez, I hope we play them just because we can give them a high five. Like, thanks for drawing with Panama. It took a ton of pressure off of us in that first game of that last window. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting. But again, I hope we draw some people that will challenge us and test us a little bit, especially if they sit in a low block. Because I think we could see Iran in a low block. I don't know if we'll see that from Wales or Scotland, but I think Iran will sit in a low block and try to hurt us on the counter. And we're just going to need some experience with regard to that. All right, everybody. I'm calling it a podcast here. In Soccer We Trust. I'm going to get final thoughts. I'm going to start with Hollywood Heath Pearce, then we'll go to Charlie Chuckwagon Davies to get their final thoughts. Also, as a reminder, we have 2 more In Soccer We Trust podcasts coming to you this week on Thursday and Friday. If you're going to watch it live with us on the YouTubes, we're going to start at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern on Thursday, and 12 p.m. Pacific and 3 p.m. Eastern on Friday. So we hope that you can come back and join us again.
You flip-flop them.
I did?
Yeah. Thursdays 3 Eastern.
You're on a perfect run, Jimmy. You're on a perfect run.
You know what? I did that on purpose because now you're going to actually remember it that I made those mistakes. Okay, 12 p.m. Pacific on Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern, and then on Friday, 10 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern. So we hope you guys come back for that. Hit the notifications, turn it, like and subscribe, all that good stuff. Same on podcast form. Hollywood Heath, I'm coming to you. Final thoughts as we kind of get into the acceptance of our World Cup draw and looking forward to these friendlies and CONCACAF Nations League, and of course, how our players are playing around the world.
Yeah, no, I actually don't have a final thought, Jimmy. You were on a perfect run, and I was going to compliment you for your perfect run, and then it ended up. Oh man, I just got attacked that Heath lives in 2008. You know. Okay,
no.
here's my final thought. In 2008, I was I played more minutes than anybody in the national team since we're going back to 2000.
Heath Pearce, everybody.
Which, by the way, in the US Soccer
flexes
Yearbook is wrong. And says that I was tied with somebody, and it's wrong. I want them to go reprint that whole 100-year yearbook thing that they did. Reprint it, put a footnote saying it was wrong. I want them to apologize to me, and I want front row seats to every national team game for the rest of my lifetime.
We'll get Michael Cameraman on the phone, make sure that's all corrected. Charlie Davies, final thoughts.
Let's go. Let's get this Nations League drawn, and I want to know that the friendlies are against some top countries that are going to really test us. You know, it'd be easy to play, some country that didn't qualify for the World Cup that maybe is going into it with maybe not the same intentions. I want us to be playing against the very best and keeping us hungry and keeping us not being able to settle. We got to continue to keep progressing.
That's it. From Chuck's lips to everybody else's ears, including U.S. Soccer. Give us some tough games. We want to get better. We need to get better. That's the only way we're going to continue to move this forward. My final thoughts. Thank you for listening to In Soccer We Trust. So on behalf of producer Alex, producer Des, Charlie Chuckwagon Davies, and Hollywood Heath Pearce, I'm Jimmy Conrad saying thank you for listening, and we will see you next time. Later.